with the GOAT bracket, round two here. And right off the bat, we have a big matchup here. Uh, Roman Reigns versus Ric Flair. Uh, what do you guys want to begin on this one? Of course, we have Ric Flair, 16-time world champion, swag personified, Four Horsemen, WCW franchise guy, the ability to keep going into old age, still trying to wrestle as always. And we have Roman Reigns, our modern day, I don't know if you want to call him Hulk Hogan, John Cena, Samoan lineage, greatness personified of this era. What do you guys want to start on this one?
See, when I look at this matchup, and I was thinking about this all week, see, it's kind of unfair to kind of compare these two in a sense because we knew that Ric Flair, dominated. I mean, Ric Flair was considered one of the best wrestlers from like the late '80s into the early '90s and such, where Roman's heel run began in what was it? Summer of 2020.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. See, we don't even know how much longer this is gonna last. but when it does end, can you compare that run to what Ric Flair has done in his time from being known as the greatest wrestler from the early 80s? I mean, from the mid-late 80s to the early 90s, that run of being the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Do those compare? And if you can't compare them, then I think that's who you ultimately would have to go with. But on top of that, when you look at Ric Flair, I didn't know. I said it last week. Ric Flair is a cultural icon. Like still to this day, like like we said, athletes are still repeating his catchphrases to get warmed up for games. He has his own song, Ric Flair Drip. I mean, for God's sakes, the man had his supposed last match earlier this year.
His fourth last match.
The man. Also, I watched it. He didn't look half bad.
Until his heart almost stopped.
We're not doing that.
Exactly.
We're not doing that.
But so because of all that, compared to the run that Roman has had, and when you look at even before that, everything Roman has done, the multiple WrestleMania main events. When I ultimately look at it, Roman was positioned in that way, and Roman did a hell of a job, and Roman has earned everything he's earned. I'm talking about before the heel turn, but he still hadn't formed that connection with the fans that I felt that Ric Flair as a heel took from the fans in a sense. You know what I mean? So in that case, I would have to go with Ric Flair.
For me, it's honestly the first thing that Dan said, 16-time world champion. Like, yes, Roman has the longest reign in the modern day, which, hasn't been done since Punk was around, and even before that. I don't even know who had a longer reign after him, but
I think it's Hogan.
And look at that. See how few lengthy reigns, that kind of all stopped in the 80s. To actually hold a title for longer than a year is not a common thing that we all grew up watching. That was stuff from way back then. But Rick, since he came, has held the title everywhere, and that's already synonymous with the 16 time. Like, it's still spoken about today. And, to what Brian says, we're just getting this greatness of Roman that literally the last 3 years. Yes, he's main evented multiple times. He's only, what does he have? 6 title reigns or 4? Whatever
Roman,
the number
I think
is.
he has.
Was it 6?
Let me check.
For sure.
6, right?
Oh yeah. Shit.
Yep, you got 6. Yep. Check
Yeah,
your
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's
stats
over
there.
So
6.
I mean, it is hard to compare because obviously the length and time that Ric Flair has been wrestling and the impact that he has had on the business, like what we have now, we wouldn't have because of Ric Flair. But that and also is the reason why
Mhm.
he's that great and that influential. I mean, as big as Roman is right now, and yes, you can give him all the credit in the world, but like we said, it's literally these last 3 years that we've been getting his like peak heel work, which,
Mhm.
yes, he did come into the business as a heel, but they tried to make him the next John Cena, and you literally had John Cena coming back and saying, they're bringing me back because you can't do your job. As much as like, that's part of the story, or John just being John, it honestly was true because people were tired of seeing Roman and Brock, Roman and the Tyler Picker, and we're like, okay, we get it. He's the guy.
Mhm.
And we're just not rocking with it. Like, this man won the Royal Rumble and was booed the hell out of there. So, yes, what he's doing.
2016.
And I was one of those people too. I was like, really? Like, again.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and the crazy thing is Ric Flair has probably been a heel probably almost his entire career, but his heel work was just so great.
Pretty
And
much.
it's what's synonymous with him, and at the same, I'm gonna have to go with Ric Flair. So,
Mhm. Okay. Yep. I'm going to make it unanimous here. It's Ric Flair. You think about what he's done, of course, when you talk about his heel work. He made heels cool, right? Like of that era, you can't think of a cool heel like that. You just thought of a heel as a big monster, um, beats everybody up as a bruiser, and then takes the L, right? When, like we think about the Hogan days and stuff like that. King Kong Bundy and all these other guys, Iron Sheik, all these other guys that just took the L. Ric Flair made it cool to be bad, right, in wrestling, right? Like you think of Roddy Piper, you think of guys of that caliber, but on championship status, it's Ric Flair, right? Like his heel work in terms of getting his ass kicked the whole match, and then being resourceful and finding a way to win. Like he's the master of that.
yep.
Watching his old matches, with Ricky Dragon Steamboat, the Hour Broadways they call them, all that stuff there, the ability to go night in, night out like that. We've seen too much of Ric Flair overall his career, even when he came back to WWF at the time, WWE, he's had an intercontinental reign, into old age. You know what I mean? And,
So
battling
yeah.
those guys, really every era of wrestling when you really think about it, and just thinking about his impact in terms of being Ric Flair, he was nothing else, right? Like you think of Roman Reigns as the guy on the Shield, you think of him trying to be the white meat babyface, and now you have the tribal chief. Ric Flair is Ric Flair. Like there's nothing else there. There's no other drip. There's no other persona. There's nothing else to change. There's nothing else. He's Ric Flair. And of course, talking on Roman's side here, you think about his his streak right now in terms of longevity. It's like, he's been able to beat a lot of people, right? Like, but in terms of Ric Flair, he's literally done it all. Like when you really think about it, looking at it. And then I always just think about the thing that was the feather in his cap was the ability to go somewhere else and be that top guy in WWF, right? Like to come in, win the Royal Rumble, be that top guy, carry it to WrestleMania, drop the Savage. He had a pretty much great year in wrestling in WWF, and you're thinking about that coming in to win the Royal Rumble. That's synonymous with him in terms of my memories of him. And then you just think about WCW, Dusty Rhodes feuds, Harley Race, the Von Erichs, Nikita Koloff, like Sting, that iteration, battling Hogan when he came in. Even the late 90s crazy Ric Flair that we got in WCW is legendary. Him throwing off his clothes, elbowing the mat, all that stuff. Like we still remember that stuff. You can't think enough about
Knee
Ric Flair
drops
when
to
it
his
comes
jacket. Random knee drops. Yo, that shit. Every time he does that shit, me and my brother always be dying.
even when we think about his time and impact, even though that was the forgotten years of Ric Flair, right? Like we didn't want to see Ric Flair in that light. the woo with Jay Lethal, right? Like the back and forth of all that, him just being a senile old man. Although we didn't want to see him like that, it was funny at times. So it's like just the ability to be a guy that is wrestling, right? Like personified, like in every sense of the word. With Evolution, he was a manager. He was a wrestler. He was a gimmick. Like all this stuff here, and being able to do it in different places. The Four Horsemen, Evolution, Fortune, I believe it was, in TNA Impact. Managing Charlotte when he came back was entertaining, and having that go back and forth. So it's like you can't. I don't even think it's a knock against Roman Reigns, because it's just, he's going up against Ric Flair, right? Like this guy's great.
He also knocked up Lacey Evans.
Oh my God! What a horrible story! Damn you, Vince!
Oh my God!
She's like never recovered from that.
No, it's like he was trying to throw a little Jerry Springer in the modern day.
In 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
That's ridiculous.
I instantly just thought about like Tori Wilson's dad and Dawn Marie. I was like, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this?
Now, Daniel, now I was interested in that storyline, especially the whole story. As a kid. As a kid back then, I was interested in
terrible, man.
As a kid, I wasn't thinking about how bad the storyline is. I was just watching it as a fan. I was interested in that. I mean, when a segment like that, main event SmackDown, that's gonna or end SmackDown. Come on.
That was so terrible. But no, I think we can make it unanimous here. We're going with Ric Flair over Roman Reigns, the tribal chief. Yeah, it is what it is. It's Ric Flair, man. We can move on to our next one here.